Gretchen, before we kind of talk about today's conversation around the senses, how's your nose?
My nose is good. No, we both bonded over our love of the sense of smell. So, which many people have taken for granted traditionally in the West, but not us.
No, we're big perfume heads. I'm wearing a cherry oud fragrance today.
Ooh.
So it's like a little woody. It's like wood kind of like melted. And then you have like that sticky cherry scent. Hopefully if you're sitting next to me, you're not, overwhelmed by the fragrance. And so Gretchen's book, she explores how can we find happiness through thinking more about the senses, whether that's sight, hearing, touch, smell,
Taste.
and taste.
A popular one.
And so, Gretchen, can you talk a little bit about when you started on this experiment? Which senses did you say, like, these are my, foreground senses, these are the ones that I lean on the most?
Well, it's interesting because I do think that some people are more attuned to their senses than others, and I'm very much like a person who was stuck in my head and very detached from my senses, generally. But I would say I went into it with my foreground senses being smelling and seeing. And so I really, but what I didn't know, and this is, I'm like, how do you not know this about yourself? What I found in the process of writing the book is I'm very, very touch focused, but I didn't even know that about myself. That's how stuck in my head I was, is I didn't even realize how much I loved my sense of touch. And after the book came out, I did I set up a quiz. Gosh, I had this amazing work here. I did a quiz, which anybody can take at GretchenRubin.com, which will tell you your most neglected sense. And this is actually a really useful thing to know because you're with your appreciated sense, like, we have adventures about smell. We talk about smell. We engage with people with smell. We use it for comfort and pleasure. We reminisce about it. We use it to invoke memories. But with our neglected senses, we don't use it. And my most neglected senses are taste and hearing. It's tasting and hearing. But guess what? So now that the quiz is out in the world, it's selection bias. So all you scientists, I know it's not true science, but one of the things that's interesting is that of the appreciated senses, smelling and tasting are at the top. Those are the two most popular ones. So my two most neglected are the ones that that are the most popular. So, but I think we each have our own set of what we are in the foreground and which are in the background. And by figuring out what that is, you can find ways for low-hanging fruit for happiness.
So tell me a little bit more about how you decided to pursue those underappreciated senses. Because you're right, my dad's a chef. I love to eat.
Right.
I'll try anything pretty much once, but what's funny is I don't eat cheese. It's very un-Italian of me. My Sicilian family is horrified. And you have a couple of pages in your book dedicated to trying different cheeses.
Yes.
So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you were able to re-engage your sense of taste.
Right, because it is my most neglected sense. I was thinking, okay, well, how can I have adventures? What can I do that is right for me, but still pushes me to do things I wouldn't ordinarily do? So one of the things I did is I went to Flavor University, which is this 2-day course, which anybody can take. It's in Geneva, Illinois. They wrote me and they're like, you're not the typical person who would come. Most of them are like people who design like toothpaste or dog food or things like that. And nougat, there was somebody who was a specialist in the chemical properties of nougat. But I was like, well, I'd like to come if you'll have me, so they let me come. But my favorite activity that we did was we would do taste tests where we would compare varieties. So like we compared cream, half and half, whole milks, 2% skim milk, oat milk, almond milk, and it was just fascinating to do these just taste tests with just ordinary things, and you realize how different things taste. And so one of the things I did to engage with people, because one of the big aims at happiness is to engage with people more effectively, was I did a taste party with some friends where we tasted like varieties of apples. And I thought, Fuji, Gala, right? They both kind of look alike. Can you really taste the difference? Yes, you can. You really can. And Red Delicious, they're not that delicious. They're really, really popular. They're not that good to me. And so we all, talked about it, argued about it, and it was just really fun. It was a way to engage with the senses. It was my most neglected sense. It allowed me to bring it into the foreground in a way that felt sort of creative and fresh and more fun than just like having a dinner party.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so
the why ketchup is magic. Heinz ketchup hits all 5 of the basic tastes. the next time you're around some ketchup, which is constantly because we were surrounded by ketchup, just take one little dab on your tongue and really taste it. It's sweet, it's sour, it's salty, it's bitter, it's umami. It's a taste sensation. There's a reason it's the secret ingredient in so many foods. So I'd help my friends just taste a little ketchup, and their minds were blown. You know,
apparently pad thai
has ketchup. It's noodles with ketchup.
Who knew?
Yeah, it's kind of discouraging, right?
I know. I think I'm trying to be like healthy,
Right.
but maybe not.
Yeah.
And then you were talking about music, right, and sound, because if you're getting an MRI, isn't that right? That a lot of times people will say like, "Do you want to put music on?" And you're like, "Not for me."
Not for me.
No,
No, I don't.
So, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, so hearing was also one of my most neglected senses, and so like. How many people here would like never just like turn on music in the background? Okay, never. Generally, yeah. There's not many of us. I just basically don't ever turn on music. And if I'm stressed out and other people are playing music in my household, I'll turn it down. I'll turn it off because because what I do when I'm stressed out is I try to bring down my sensory load. Some people, when they're stressed out, they bring up their sensory load. They'll put an ice cube in their mouth, or they'll bite into a lemon. They'll do something to overwhelm them with sensation, but I bring it down. If you're studying the sense of hearing, music is such a huge thing. And here's the interesting thing about music. It's present in all human culture. All human culture have music, and they don't know why. Because it's not 100% clear. There's not a lot of agreement about why something that doesn't seem to be evolutionarily necessary is everywhere. So clearly, it plays this extremely important role. So I didn't tap into music. So I had to find a way. So I went to a concert, which for me was a whole great experience. Made a audio apothecary of my favorite feel-good songs, which many people do all the time, but I didn't have that. So it was a real new tool for me to use.
Have you been using that too still?
I do use it, but I will admit I still don't listen to music just as part of my ordinary. But there's such an interesting range. Okay, let me ask a question. So if you're doing deep work, you're really thinking, you're really concentrating. Okay. Here are how many people would, the choices are silence, busy hum, that's like coffee shop, music with words, music without words, or white noise. Okay, how many people would, if you had to pick, how many people would prefer silence? Oh, that's a lot. Okay, how many people would prefer busy hum, coffee shop? Not many. Oh, how many people have music with words? How many people have music without words? Okay, more. And how about white noise, like fans? Okay, see, this is so interesting. And then I've talked to people they'll listen to the same, I was just talking to somebody this morning, same song on a loop all day long. Okay. This blows my mind. But my point is that in writing the book, I realized one of our challenges if we want to live a happier, healthier, more productive, more creative life is thinking about, well, what is the sensory environment that's in which I thrive? And we don't have total control, so you can't, always have things your way. But I didn't even know what my way was. I never tried to shape my sensory surroundings because I just never thought about it. And once you start seeing I really do better with this, or I really do better with that, you can also understand conflicts with other people. Because if one person is saying, how can you possibly work with your desk so messy? And you're but I like to have a messy desk. It's yeah, because you both prefer different sensory surroundings. So the question is, how do you cooperate rather than who's right, who's wrong?
I'm gonna tell my sister that because I live with her and she's like my mother, and everything has to be put away. And I'm like, I like a mess. I like to work,
So then the question becomes, well, how do we create an environment where both people feel comfortable instead of I'm right, you're wrong?
Right.
Right. Because people like to pull a scientific study out of their back pocket, and then you get into the battle of the scientific studies of a messy lab means more creative scientists or whatever. Yeah.
Again, I'm going to use this.
Yeah.
So you have 2 daughters and a husband. So how do you manage trying to figure out, 1, this is what I need, and then 2, cohabitating, which a lot of people are doing during COVID in tech spaces, at least in New York.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think that's one of the biggest things that comes up is where people have different preferences. Like I said, with the music, I really don't like having music playing, and other people do. And so I just decided, how much of a killjoy am I, right? Let them play the music if they want to. But I think there are a lot of accommodations. Like I don't wear perfume out. I'll wear perfume to bed, but I don't wear it out because a lot of people just don't want you to be wearing perfume, so I don't do it. In my household, I'm pretty fortunate that we all are sort of more or less the same. I don't eat sugar, so there's a lot of things that others eat that I don't eat, but they can still have it. It does, But yeah.
And in terms of trying to figure out like how you could be your truest self, to be Gretchen, like
Right.
at your essence, did you find that journaling was the most helpful to say, okay, I realized
I don't
that
journal.
You don't journal?
No. I mean, I have my five senses journal, but that's hardly a journal.
Can you talk more about that, though?
Okay. Well, so the five senses journal, I'm like the happiness writer who was very irritated by her gratitude journal. So one of the things I found, it's easy to feel changed and it's harder to stay changed. And so my fear was that once I wasn't working on a book about the five senses, I would just go right back to being stuck in my head. So what I started is I had just a notebook where I wrote seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and then each day I write down a notable memory. So I guess it is a kind of journal. I think of journaling as a much lengthier process, but this is just writing down. Like I was walking around Aspen and they still have lilacs in bloom, which where I live, the lilacs are long gone. And I smelled lilacs. So if I would write that down, like lilacs in bloom in late June, or you pick up some cottonwood fluff and you're like, okay, what does that feel like? So I would just write that down. And that is good because it keeps it uppermost in my mind as an exercise, like stay tuned to the five senses, don't float off back into your head. And then also it does kind of act as a gratitude journal. Like I found a gratitude journal as a gratitude journal annoying, but I feel like I'm paying tribute to the beauty of the world. Someone is acknowledging that there are lilacs in bloom in late June, and somebody is appreciating the cottonwood fluff. So I did find that to be very useful, and it's also very quick because I'm just writing down like a handful of words.
But
And
sometimes that works for people,
it's
right?
fine. No, it's fine. And I also have like a one-sentence journal, and that's just one sentence. So yeah. So for people who have that itch to keep a journal, but they can't sustain it. How many people have journals that go to January 10th? Yeah.
That's my gym routine,
Yeah.
One thing I really found very cool about your book is that, you live in New York City, and the range of experiences that Gretchen had throughout this project went from, most of them were free.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when you hear like work on your happiness, it's like, here's a workbook and here are the 50 things that you need to buy. Yeah. My Instagram will tell me, yes, would you like happiness? Would you like these clogs? The answer is always yes. And so can you talk a little bit more about how you decided to go to the Met as a great way of trying to figure out how to not only hone your foreground senses, but also, bring forward those background senses?
So I'm extremely fortunate. I live within walking distance of the Met, and I have the time and freedom to go. And as a New York State resident, I can go for free. So I never take that for granted. So that started my college roommate was like, note to self: live within walking distance of the Met. I was like, point taken. But the fact is, I lived within walking distance of the Met for years, and I almost never went. So the fact that it's there doesn't mean that I was taking advantage of it. And for me, the Met kind of represented the treasure trove of the world that I did not avail myself of because I just wasn't paying attention. And I've always been very interested intellectually in repetition and familiarity and like how things reveal themselves over time. Like I love Andy Warhol because Andy Warhol is also very interested in familiarity and repetition. And I'm an all or nothing person. I can do something all the time or never, but sometimes it's hard for me. So the idea of doing something every day felt really exciting for me. So I thought, okay, I'll go to the Met every single day that it's open for a year. And that year is long gone. I still go every day because I love it so much. And I thought that this was a very unusual thing, very idiosyncratic to want to do it, but I found out that many people shared this desire. So people will do exactly the same walk with their dog. People who do forest bathing will do the same sit spot. People who, I talked to a guy, he was like, I go to my same large CVS every day. And I was like, there's so much going on in a big CVS. I would definitely go there every day. I mean, like the seasonal stuff, the clerks and their drama, like what's going on. What are like looking at the branding. Anyway, so I mean, of course, I'm incredibly lucky that it's the Met. The Met is special, but I think this idea that with your senses you can experience something over and over and that it will change very gradually. I mean, this is so true for nature, that people love to see nature unfold over time. Yeah, that's how I decided to do it, and I never stopped.
You mentioned in your book that you started to also then pay attention to everything around you. So you're walking down the cityscape and saying, oh, these 3 buildings, are different stone, they're colors, but they all have the same green on it.
Yeah.
Did you find that color was jumping out at you because sight is one of your primary senses?
Yeah, well, I had gone through a big preoccupation with color years before, where I wrote this weird little book called My Color Pilgrimage. Like, I have no way to. There is a color historian in France, and I remember thinking, like, oh my gosh. Green is coming out in August. This is so exciting. Like, I've had yellow, I've had black, I've had blue, but now green's coming. So I really do love color. And I have, one of the really fun things to do in the Met is to pick a color, like you can pick your, like a Pantone color, whatever, and then go look for it and see if you can find it. I'll predict, where do I think I could find this color? Is it there? Colors are it's a very fun way to look around.
Have you been stumped yet? Like, did you come in? I know in your example you have like a mossy kind of like green.
Oh, the ugly color.
That ugly green. You know what I'm visualizing? Like maybe a little swampy. Is that and you found it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the reason I was looking for that color is Australia was trying to make the ugliest packaging required for cigarettes. So they were like, okay, what is the ugliest color? Interesting philosophical question. What is the ugliest color? They decided that the ugliest color was it's a Pantone color. It's also called baby poop, so it's sort of a greenish brown. But the fact is this color is present in the Mona Lisa. I found it in many great masterpieces in the Met, because what does it mean to have the ugliest color? It's all context. It's all how you use it. And so, there's I would say there is no ugliest color, but it was a fun challenge to see if I could find it.
That's very fun. And you weren't stumped at all? You weren't able to be like, I'm gonna look for scarlet today, or any other color? You always seem to find it?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain kinds of like neon colors that you probably couldn't find in the Met, but like the non-neon colors, I think you could find just about everything.
That's very exciting.
Yeah.
I know you went on a hunt looking for like a bowl of all these different trinkets.
Yeah.
In one color.
Or scarlet.
Have you continued doing that? And have you ever done it with other colors since trying?
I've never done it with other colors. I love color blocking. Like, when people when they put their books by color, like that looks really cool. Like I'm a real reader, so I have to be able to find them by other means, like author title, author name. But I love the way that looks. So yeah, I thought. And there's different art projects that you've seen, and you see this in nature all the time, where if you have everything in one color, it doesn't clash. It just looks beautiful. Like if you look at a big vista that's all different greens, I mean, the colors of nature really never clash. But that again was something I was always sort of creatively interested in, is like just a bunch of different objects. Has anybody seen Pink Project? Anyway, so I did it with Scarlet, and I keep adding to it. I've kind of raised my standards a little bit more.
Ooh, how so?
It's got to be a really good. It's got to be a really good Scarlet. Yeah.
It's funny that you say this, because I was reflecting on the trip I took to Poland, and I was on a bus for 10 days. And I had my college boyfriend's mom's Kindle, and it was black and white. And I read 10 books during that trip, according to my Goodreads. I cannot tell you any of the books I read because there was no cover.
Right.
And I remember, it was on that vacation, I was reading this book. This is the colors I had.
Right.
And so it's so interesting when I was reading your book, because I was already conjuring my own memories of, you're talking about this scent journey that you went on, or, you went to Russ and Daughters and had these sandwiches. And I was thinking about my own experiences, like what my own childhood was like, or what my bookshelf looks like. And so I found it to be very evocative reading your book. And I felt there were easy ways to think about how this applies to me.
Right.
And so I would love.
That's really all my work. I would say it's like what I do isn't that important. Like it's just really supposed to spark an idea in who's reading it, and that's usually what happens. People are like, "Well, I wouldn't do what she did," but now I've thought of something else that I would try. So and people put their own twist on things. So I think that's my hope. It's just like. Yeah, you don't have to go to Flavor University. I do that so you don't have to, but yeah.
No, but I think your book sparks such a sense of wonder. And so I was hoping that you could talk a little bit more about, like we're talking about all these like fun experiments, but I'm wondering if anything that really stuck with you during this time that you're like, wow, this is going to have like a really meaningful impact on how I continue to live going forward. And it seems like the Met, still going.
Yeah, I
really
still
impressive.
go. Yeah. And it still unfolds itself for sure. One thing that surprised me is being sort of more meaningful than I expected. So for the sense of taste, because I was trying to use my sense of taste, and I wanted to engage with other people. So I'm very close to my in-laws. They live right around the corner from me, and I mean right around the corner. Like you don't even cross the street. And so I thought that a fun taste exercise would be to go to the Lower East Side, which is famous for having traditional Jewish foods, with my mother-in-law, who was raised eating all these traditional Jewish foods, and I very much associate them with her. And then my daughters wanted to come too, so all four of us went down there, and I had mapped it out with like all the major places, like Russ and Daughters that you mentioned, and so we had a knish, we had a bialy, we had pickles. And then she just talked about her memories, and just kind of a free floating way. It wasn't like I was quizzing her or had some kind of like set of questions. And what I found was that it really was a way to talk about the past and talk about her upbringing in a way that I think would have been hard to just evoke, like, let's sit down and talk about your childhood, which she would never have cooperated with, by the way. And it would have felt very artificial, but this was fun. It was like we were all experiencing it, and a lot of the food was different from what she remembered, but it was the same kind of food, so she would talk about it. But what was most interesting to me was for my daughters. One of the things that came out a lot during our walk and our tasting was her talking about her own grandmother. Because when she was growing up, she and her parents lived with her grandparents, and her grandmother was the one who cooked, and she was a wonderful cook. She would spend all day cooking. She said it was always an all-day project. And my daughter said, well, we knew that her grandmother was really important to Grandma, but she doesn't talk about her very much. So for them, it was hearing the stories about the grandmother that was the most meaningful. And I would never have been able to go there. I wouldn't have been able to evoke that because I didn't know that was the case. But I think, all the senses have so much power for evoking memories. And people have their different favorite ones, but certainly taste is one of the ones where your taste of childhood, and so it was really interesting to harness that power, and I didn't expect that to work out the way that it did. I thought it would be more like a fun outing, and it ended up being pretty profound.
That's really lovely. What do you think it is about the senses that really connects people? Because, you and I spoke before we both got to Aspen, and I said, I love perfume, and she went, oh my God, me too. We chatted so much about a shared love. So I'm curious, what do you think kind of binds us all together across the five senses, or do you see that there's maybe some in particular that bring something out?
No, and I think that this is a really important thing to think about, especially in times when we're thinking about how can we bring people together, which is we can share the five senses. And I think this is why a lot of every museum exhibit or store or class is promising that it's going to be immersive. Partly, I think it's just because it feels so compelling. Like the idea that something is immersive sounds so delicious. But it's also like people of any education level, people of any age, you can bring whatever you want to it, and everybody can engage in their own way and talk about it and share it. And it's something that we're sharing in the moment. Like it's not something that is going to happen in the future. Like we have to share it, and whether that's like immersive Van Gogh or the Office experience, Harry Potter world. All these things are about experiencing something in the moment. And I think it really does. I heard about I thought this was a great Thanksgiving tradition. So you know how there are those bizarre kinds of ice cream flavors that you're like, you really want to try cream corn ice cream, but like who's going to waste an entire ice cream cone on that flavor? So what they do in their families, instead of getting apple pie or whatever, they get many cartons of very, very unusual, whimsical ice cream flavors. And then they just each take a couple spoonfuls and pass it around and talk about what they like and they don't like. What I thought was so brilliant about this is like, it's fun, it's imaginative, it's a little whimsical. It kind of scratches that itch of like wanting to taste a bunch of things kind of at a low level. And like you could be 3 years old or you could be 93 years old and you can participate. You have your views. Everybody can argue and discuss. And it's just something that you share in that moment. So I think the senses often offer opportunities that way for people to engage in the moment together.
And are there other ways to engage more deeply? I know you're talking about in your book how we lean on our other senses when some are not available.
Right.
So can you, like how, if I wanted to intensify my eating experience of
Right.
eating some ice cream, I know you
Right.
eat sugar, but
Right, yeah.
how would I be able to do that?
Well, when and obviously not everybody has all 5 senses, and we each have our own complement of senses. But when one sense is brought down, then the others sort of will fill in. So one way that you can intensify one sense is by you can work with them. So like lights turn down during a concert so we can hear better. I'm a fearful driver, so I'll turn off the radio so that I can see better. We close our eyes when we kiss. And I did the dining in the dark. This is fun. In New York City, a lot of cities have this, where a restaurant will have a thing where you go and you eat blindfolded. We had like these like very official sort of masks that went on, so you could open your eyes, but you couldn't see anything. And again, it wasn't what I expected. It was very different from what I expected it to be, but it was really interesting. So you could do that. You can play with what your experiences are if you want to intensify your connection to some of them. Yeah.
Very cool. And I think you were saying that you were having trouble like finding, like without your eyesight, it was hard to ground yourself. Is that true?
Well, this was the funny thing is like beforehand they handed out wash towels, which is an odd thing to do for a restaurant, but okay, fine. And then I like halfway through, I'm like, I think I know why they're doing this, because I kept using my fingers because I couldn't find the food with the fork and get it to my mouth. And like it would drop out. I'm like, where'd it go? I have no idea. So I just started using my fingers, and nobody could see it. So then I was like, okay, they must have learned this in the past, and that's why they're really encouraging everybody to wash their hands, like clean their hands at the last minute. Yeah, it was also they played loud music, which I thought was odd. Maybe to intensify the sense of taste, but what it did is it made it hard to stay oriented with the people that I was eating with. It was like I had to keep trying to touch them to figure out where they were. It was interesting to realize how you rely on different senses for something as common as this, like eating at a restaurant.
And going back to your point earlier about how you need silence to get work done,
Mm-hmm.
I never really thought about the loudness in a restaurant or like
Oh, yeah.
the noise and whether
Oh,
or
my
not
gosh.
that changes your experience.
Yeah, no, they do that. That is very artfully done. You eat faster if it's louder, and so that helps them turn tables faster. But in grocery stores, they play slow music because you move more slowly, and the longer you're in a store, the more you're likely to buy. So we go into music. Speeds us up and slows us down, and so yeah. So and the loudness or the softness of it. Yeah, I want to start a chain of quiet restaurants. That's what I want. It's the quiet restaurant. Yes, right? Yes, let's have the quiet restaurant. No, they do not have the quiet restaurant chain yet.
But they do have sense, like going into stores. I don't know if anyone is a parent of a teenager from the early aughts, but my dad can't walk past the mall without the scent of Abercrombie hitting him. And he's like,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
no.
Angel. Yeah.
Angel for you. Okay.
Yeah.
What was that? What would be your earliest scent memory then in terms of thinking about you smell something, you're like, oh my God, I know exactly where I was.
Oh,
this really hits.
The smell of my grandparents' kitchen. That's the smell that I
What did it smell like?
I don't know. Like they had like this bread bin that had a very distinct smell, and it wasn't even a good smell or a bad smell. It's just a very particular smell. It's funny. I live in an apartment building, and my friend was like, "Your lobby has a very distinctive smell. It's not a good smell. It's not a bad smell, but it's a distinctive smell." And I was like, "Okay, I'll take it. Yeah, I would like a candle of lobby, my lobby." The candle. Yeah, because it does. It brings back memories so much. Yeah.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
But speaking of the fact that you can't smell your own lobby, is that
Right.
something?
I can still smell my lobby. I can't smell my apartment.
Okay.
But why can I
Why
smell
is
the
that?
lobby? That's
Yes.
interesting. Okay. This is fascinating. And this is one of the things that surprised me most in studying the five senses was that we can be in completely different sensory experiences. And you kind of intellectually know that. You know, some people are colorblind or, there's genetic differences. But it is astonishing the degree to which people are just have different, like the dress is probably the most dramatic. How many people saw white and gold? Do you remember the dress from 2015? Yeah. How many people saw blue and black? Okay. It is blue and black. You are seeing the real color. I cannot look at it and see it blue and black. Usually with an optical illusion, you can make it go back. You can see the face or the vases. I mean, the vases or the face. And like, I live in New York City. I'm always recording, and I cannot hear a siren because I just hear them all the time. My brain does not alert me to the sense of a siren. But when my sister's corgis bark, on a recording, I hear that, and she doesn't hear the corgis. And you cannot smell your home the way a guest smells it because of odor fatigue. So you're so habituated to that smell that you don't smell it. But somebody coming into your house would smell it their eyes could be watering because the smell of air freshener is so strong, and you will not smell it, which just seems to me astonishing. But but if you went away for a month, then you could smell it. So for some reason, I can still smell my lobby, but I can't smell my apartment.
So is there like a certain threshold for, like your home you're often there, so
Yeah.
it would take a month to get back? Like, did you find that there was any?
Oh, I didn't look at that.
Time constraint?
Yeah. No, like baristas have that experience, with the smell of coffee, or like factory workers and stuff. Yeah.
No, it's true though. Like you go into a coffee shop and you get hit with that like very fragrant,
Right.
nutty smell, and then
It fades out. Yeah, but if you work there every day, it would fade out
I think also touch was something that I think is probably one of my underappreciated senses.
Yeah.
I generally don't want people to touch me. And so I thought it was really lovely that you do like a family hug with your family to feel more connected. So
Right.
can you talk a little bit how is it getting teenagers to be hugged? Are they
I have a very cuddly family, so I'm lucky. But one of the things about touching is with a neglected sense, like back to this idea of what's your neglected sense, it's like do it in the way that's right for you. And some people don't like to be touched by other people. But I've spoken to many people who've taken the quiz and are like, okay, well, now that I'm thinking about my sense of touch, it's like, well, maybe you could touch fabrics or nature, like you go out of your way to touch leaves or grass or moss or stones. You don't have to do it. There's no right way to do it. Or maybe you just want to be more aware of things that you don't like, and so you create a sensory environment that's more delightful to you because you've eliminated things that don't please you. And so, so a huge part of touching is the touch of other people, but people are very different and cultures are very different in what they consider to be appropriate touch.
So you mentioned that you could add something or take away something.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that could infuse happiness?
Right. Well, yeah, I mean, one of the ways you can add more of what you like, or you can take away what you don't like. And often we don't spend enough time just thinking like, well, are there things in my environment that are not pleasing to me, and could I get rid of them? So for instance, for me, okay, even though I love the sense of smell, we got a brand of trash bags that had this fresh, clean smell. And you just buy the same thing over and over again, because who can be bothered to rethink that decision? And then finally I was like, 10 years later, I'm like, I don't mind the smell of garbage nearly as much as I mind the smell of these garbage bags. And I'm like, I'm buying this. Like, I'm going out of my way to buy this. And so and I remember when my daughter was a baby, I bought some kind of diaper cream, and I found myself turning my face away from my like delicate, beautiful newborn baby because the smell was so bad. And I'm an underbuyer. I hate buying stuff, and I'm very cheap. But I'm like, am I going to actually throw away a whole practically unused tube of diaper cream because it just smells so bad that I can't stand it? And I'm like, yes, I am, because I don't want to be disgusted by my own beautiful baby because this smell is so horrible. So it's just realizing like we can take action sometimes, not always, but sometimes, to bring our environment into better connection with our.
I love that.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, it sounds kind of superficial, but these little things can drain us and kind of try our patience and make it hard for us to stick to our healthier habits. And when we have little luxuries, I asked for our podcast listeners for like little luxuries. And the word luxury sounds expensive and sort of very consumerist, but people were saying things like crushed ice, a milk frother, an electric kettle, buying dinner for a friend, little things. But when you think like, oh, this gives me that feeling of luxury, then you get that feeling of comfort and energy that we need if we're going to maintain our composure, stay patient with other people, maintain our empathy. We're like cell phones that need a charge, and we can do that through our five senses.
That's awesome, and I think that's a great note to open up to Q&A. We want to hear all about your senses, and what are you thinking about? Yes, sir. We're going to get you a microphone so that way everyone can hear you.
Oh, one of the things in my book is take the microphone.
Yes, why is that?
Because you might say, oh, well, this is a small group, and we'll just project, but maybe there's some people who can't hear as well. Oh. Yes, right. Yeah, to use them. Yeah, no, because people feel like it's kind of self-centered, and that it shows a kind of down to earthness not to use a microphone, but it's actually much more respectful of other people to use a microphone.
Listen, thank you guys for doing this. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Yes.
So I'm sitting here, and I live in New York City, and I'm thinking, God, you can go to the opera for free?
No, the Met, the Metropolitan Museum.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. The other Met. The other Met.
Okay,
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking, like, I want your tickets.
Okay, you're right. That's right. Oh, that's funny. I didn't even think. I'm such an unsound person that confusion didn't even occur to me. Forgot about the Metropolitan Opera. Okay.
It depends on what tote bag.
Yeah. That's right. Oh, very funny.
So my question is, if you could argue that our five senses are essentially our access
Yes.
to the world,
Yes.
should we maybe give up this idea that there's any such thing as objective?
Yeah. Well, that's a very deep philosophical question that I won't tackle. But certainly, from a five senses perspective, no. I mean, there's the what an instrument would record, but the experience of everybody in this room will be different. Yeah, and even things like your expectations matter. Like if I gave you something to smell and said, ooh, this is a pillow full of pine needles, or if I said, oh, this is an industrial floor cleaner, you would have a very different response to that smell, even if it was exactly the same smell. So yes, in terms of our sensory experiences, yeah, you couldn't really have an objective experience.
Right over here.
All right, this is great.
This is great. So this is the question of the smell that you don't like. So
Yep.
my parents' house now smells like both of my grandmothers. My dad smells like Granny's house, and my mom smells like Nanny's house, and I can't stand it. And neither can my siblings. Are there things you can do? Because you said, it builds and builds and
Yeah.
builds to like appreciate visiting them. Besides saying, I can't stand the smell.
Wow. Right, because that.
It's awful.
Well, and there's something special about smell where it feels like unusually intimately kind of insulting for you to say like you can't stand. There's something very intimate about that. So that's like would be very hard to say. Well, so you could think like, are there things you can take away? Are there things that have smells that you don't like that maybe are creating this whole thing?
Just personally, you talked about, how to help so I'm enjoying my parents instead of
Right.
smelling that Granny's apartment and
Right.
Nanny's house.
Well, the more you went, the less you would notice it. Yeah. That's not a solution that works for you. Okay. I mean, maybe if you really studied it. Sometimes, like, the more we know, the more we notice. Like, maybe instead of, like, trying to fight it off, you really, like, go deep into it and, like, try to analyze it because it's not a good... I mean, this is the thing about smells. Like, we're born with inborn, like, predilections because we need to know that to sustain life. But with smells, it's all associations. So maybe you can like really try to change your associations of the smell. Like maybe by really studying it, you might enjoy it more if you like instead of trying to kind of push it to the background, you really try to embrace it and enjoy it. It sounds like it holds a lot of memories for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Interesting question.
You want to pass it right over?
Thank you. It appears to me that everyone's particular five senses develop differently. So would would development of each sense impact one's overall health? And to the extent that it does, do we really need to recognize which one of the senses is not as well developed and work on it? Is there such a thing as developing our undeveloped sense in order to maybe have a better health? Is there a relationship between senses and health and each development?
Well, absolutely, and it's very different depending on different people. So, for instance, I mean, one of the things that many people experienced during COVID was if you didn't have a sense of smell, you lost your sense of taste, right? Because to have flavor, to have complex flavor, we have to have smell and taste. And many people didn't even know that they had lost their sense of smell. They realized it through their sense of taste. And this is a perfect example of health, because when people lose that, what you see is that they often have health consequences from it, because either they eat too much because they can't get satisfied, or they don't like to eat, they eat too little because everything tastes bad. I talked to some people who had lost their sense of smell during COVID, and like they talked about texture and like chewing and all these things that if they're removed from if you don't have the sense of smell, they become real challenges for you. And as we age, we tend to lose a lot. You know, we tend to be able to smell less. Our hearing is often affected. Our sight. So part of it is also to there's all this interesting research now about how cognitive function is, like, you really want to wear glasses, you really want to wear hearing aids if you need them, that really helps you stay cognitively functioning. And I have become much more aware of that now. So thinking about the senses and thinking about how they contribute to health is really important. And then they also contributed so much to emotional and mental health as well, because, I mean, back to the sense of smell, one of the things, somebody that I know got COVID very early on, and she's now part of a study because her sense of smell isn't coming back. She's like at 20% now, and it's not moving forward. And she was saying to me that really one of the hardest things was feeling connected to other people, and that you don't realize how much your sense of closeness comes from being able to smell someone. There's something that is called our diplomatic odor. That's our shampoo, our deodorant, our mouthwash, our toothpaste, all that. That's our diplomatic odor. But we don't think about it that much consciously, but we're very aware of it. And she said, I don't know that I would be able to like have an intimate partner now if I didn't have because without the sense of smell. So I think there's many ways we're sort of consciously aware of it, and then there's a lot of ways that it's sort of running underground and is really can play a very important role. Absolutely.
Right over here.
Very cool. Okay, I have a couple things, and I'll just say it all at once and give up the mic. Okay, one of them has to do with tinnitus. Okay,
yeah.
My husband developed tinnitus just a couple years ago. I've had it all my life, and I can drown it out. It's always there,
right.
Always. Like I could sit and actually hear doorbells and hear.
Do you know why you have it?
Well, I have a hearing aid and hearing deficiency. I just have issues.
Okay.
But anyway, just a general question about that. A comment about what you were just talking about, your natural body chemistry. I didn't really realize about that until my second husband, loving second husband, and the first thing he always says to me when I go home from a trip is, "Oh, I just missed your smell." I'm like,
"Oh,
okay. I hope that was good. I just took a shower."
Right. Right.
And the other thing
it feels very intimate. It's like there's something that's so intimate about smell.
Yes, and the last thing is I've talked with my therapist, because I need help, about intentional eating, because I have some eating issues, and I'm trying to cut out unnecessary eating. So what she was talking about is like what you were talking about, is to really savor the taste, the smell, everything, and it slows down the eating. You're more aware of what you're doing, and you eat less, and you appreciate, like you enjoy it.
Right.
So, okay, that's it.
Okay, but here's another thing that I would say, because I also write a lot about habits. I wrote a book, Better Than Before, that's all about how we can make or break habits. So I know from that a habit that a lot of people want to stop is like unhealthy eating habits, like snacking or whatever. And so one thing is the intentional, I think, which is great. But here's another thing that I learned through writing Life in 5 Senses is, like, a lot of times when we're eating, we're trying to give ourselves like a jolt of energy. Like, either you're feeling listless, or you're feeling bored, or you're feeling restless, and so you're like wandering through the kitchen, like opening up the fridge, like, rummaging through the cabinet, because you want to give yourself a little boost. You want to give yourself a little charge. Okay, so a very common way to do that is through eating. Because that's reaching for the sense of taste. But you can use your other senses as well. So if you have that feeling like, I need a little charge, I need a little something, I need to wake myself up or calm myself down or whatever, try something else. So like, we love smell, and I have a whole smell collection. Like, you would not even believe. And I'll just go smell something, or I'll just walk through the kitchen and smell some almond extract or some fresh towels. And that like jolts me, because that gives me a sensory thing. Or I was talking to a friend who loves music, and he loves, every time they release new music, like, he's very excited. And so now he saves it. And when he needs to give himself a little treat, he's like, okay, I'll have a little treat of listening to some new music. Or I have a friend who's like really into textiles, and she has a whole thing going with textiles, and she uses that through touch and like just going through them and looking at them and handling them. And that's because I think sometimes the body is just trying to get some kind of input, some kind of charge, or maybe it's just distraction. Maybe it's like, oh, I was heading for the kitchen, but now I have to go over here because this is where this sampler is. So I go off there, and by the time I'm done, I got to go back to that Zoom call, so I never make it to the kitchen in the first place. Whether it's distraction or whether it really is about giving yourself some kind of sensory input, I do not know. It's probably both. But I found that it really works for me, and many people have said that it really works for them. And again, it's like, what pleases you? What do you turn to for comfort and pleasure? It might be different for different people. Maybe you'd explore something new. But I think a lot of times we reach for that food just because it's familiar. It's like, we know that that's something to do, but we could think of other things to do.
I think we have time for one or two more questions up front, and then in the back.
So you mentioned,
I know you.
I know you too.
Yeah.
You. So you mentioned something, actually, and I always thought of this. What is color clashing?
Oh.
Is this acquired? Is this cultural? What is it?
What an interesting question. It's culturally determined at different times. Like, there are all these, let me see if I can remember these the proverbs. Is it blue and green should never be seen? Anyway, there are all these kind of like rules, and they change over time. Like, it's sometimes pink and red aren't supposed to go together, and then people love pink and red.
Go to Africa, you'll see them, for example, absolutely there. So.
Exactly. So it's fashion. A lot of it is fashion, and a lot of it is culture. And part of what is exciting about fashion is like we're so attracted to novelty and newness, and so the minute that something becomes the fashion, that it immediately goes out of the fashion. So these things are always moving. So and this is a wonderful thing. Like, if you look at interior design, like, anybody remember like avocado green and harvest gold, right? Like, that was like so of the time, and now people, it's like hurts your eyes. It's such a cliche and feels so dated. And so, yeah, color clashing is definitely, yeah.
Amazing. And then the woman in the black.
So I have a question. My boyfriend, from the very beginning of us dating, has always claimed that he's able to turn his nose off. So he will tell me, I thought at first he was just being polite, and my running shoes that don't smell very good.
Right.
I just turned my nose off, don't worry. But no, there are literally instances where we'll go to have a social experience or some kind of outing, and I'll go, oh my gosh, did you smell that? That smelled terrible. And he goes, oh no, I turned my nose off.
I have never, ever heard such a thing. Have you tested him? I would try. I would try to fake him out.
Well, I asked him, I go, how long can you turn your nose off? And he's like, 20 to 30 minutes or so.
You're
and
kidding.
I'm like, well, can you do it longer than that? He goes, no, because it starts to bother me if I do it longer. And I just have never heard. I'm a medical provider myself.
Does anybody here? Has anybody here heard of any such a thing? I don't know that you.
Oh.
My dad says that.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know if it's true or not.
Who does that?
My father has claimed that like my entire life.
Just they can voluntarily do that?
Yes, on command. He'll say like, oh, he smelled something bad. I'm just going to turn my nose off, so he doesn't experience it anymore. That scent.
Is he breathing through his mouth?
No, I mean, he's just breathing normal. There's nothing different about how he breathes. Because I've looked. I'm checking his chest rate.
This is fascinating, and I've never heard anything about this. There is a smell researcher here, but it sounds like he does a different kind of smell research. But anyway, this is absolutely fascinating. Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
I just wasn't sure if you had any details.
I have never
on
heard
that.
of such a thing, and I wouldn't have thought it would be possible. But one thing is that you would be surprised what people can do. And if two people can do it, that's interesting. Who here has had ASMR? Did anybody have that? They've only kind of recently started talking about it. I think nobody really knew to talk about it. And then people were like, do you experience this weird tingly sensation when you hear people whispering? And people are like, well, now that you mention it, I do. And I'm like, I don't experience that. But some people, like, it's like synesthesia. You know, it's like you don't know what other people are experiencing until people start talking about it. So this is interesting. Okay.
Well, please give Gretchen a round of applause.
Thank you, Amanda. This is so much fun.
Gretchen's
Thank you.
book is available for purchase. She'll be signing books as well, so make sure to stop by. And thank you all so much for coming.
Yes, thank you.
Oh.